Thank you for viewing Module 8 of our Policy Surveillance Training video series. In this video, you will learn about tracking and updating the law. By the end of this video, you should be able to define tracking and updating the law and understand the steps involved in tracking and updating the law. Tracking and updating the law consists of periodically checking for new laws or updates to existing laws that are included in a project. These are the steps you follow when tracking and updating the law. Note that when tracking and updating the law, research is conducted in batches of 5 jurisdictions at a time. Laws in those 5 jurisdictions are updated, new iterations are coded, and quality control is performed before moving on to the next 5 jurisdictions. The following slides will detail these 7 steps. The first step in tracking and updating the law consists of searching for updates. Researchers should begin an update by familiarizing themselves with the project's topic and methodology. Even in situations where the researcher worked on the dataset's initial creation, it is useful for them to refresh themselves on this information to avoid objective errors while researching and coding. Researchers who are new to the project's topic should begin by reading the background memorandums that were written for the dataset. All researchers working on an update should also review the project's research protocol. When searching for updates, jurisdictions which have been in legislative session since the last update should be checked for updates. When your project uses regulations as a source of law, you will have to check all jurisdictions for updates, regardless of when they were in legislative session. Other jurisdictions should have had no opportunity to enact new law. However, keep in mind that executive orders and emergency amendments can result in unplanned changes to the law. Once the researcher is familiarized with the dataset, they are ready to begin checking the law for updates using the master sheets which are created when collecting the law. See Module 4 for more information on collecting the law. The researcher should use a legal search engine, such as Westlaw or LexisNexis, to verify if there have been any new amendments to laws listed on the master sheets. If a law has been updated, the statutory history in a legal search engine should include an amendment that is not listed on the current master sheet. The statutory history is the session law number for bills and agency notice for regulations. Above is an illustration of what checking a master sheet for amendments would look like. The researcher should compare the statutory history in the current master sheet to the statutory history in a legal search engine to determine if there have been any recent amendments. Using search terms will allow researchers to capture jurisdictions who are enacting a new law on a topic. For example, a jurisdiction could have no distracted driving laws when a project is first created, but in an update, a researcher might notice that the same jurisdiction has just enacted a distracted driving law. So this check allows researchers to identify jurisdictions that went from no law on a topic to regulating a topic. In addition, some jurisdictions may enact new laws to regulate a different area of a topic, which will also be captured by search terms. Finally, search terms allow researchers to capture laws that were missed in the last round of research. The second step in tracking and updating the law consists of collecting new laws. When a new law or amendment is enacted, it must be collected from an unencumbered source, such as the state legislative website. The next step in tracking and updating the law consists of creating the legal text for any amendments that have been enacted since the last update. The legal text is the text used to code the law. For more information on collecting the law, including creating the legal text, please see Module 4 in the Learning Library. When creating the legal text, the researcher will have to use the updated master sheet to create an amendment tracker and collect individual laws. Amendment tracker documents are important for building policy surveillance projects because they show the progression of the law in a specific jurisdiction. Amendment trackers list amendments to relevant laws in one jurisdiction in chronological order. You will have one amendment tracker for every jurisdiction included in the project. They include the effective dates for each amendment and descriptions of the changes made in each amendment. Each entry in the amendment tracker reflects one version of the law that must be collected, built, and coded in order to measure the law across the time period included in the project. The next slide includes a sample of an amendment tracker used in the distracted driving laws project. Above is an example of an amendment tracker. For more information on creating an amendment tracker, See How to Build an Amendment Tracker under Related Resources for Module 8 on lawatlas.org. Now that the law is organized hierarchically and chronologically for policy surveillance projects, it is time to create the legal text that will be used to code. This example is a demonstration of how we use the master sheet and amendment tracker together to create the legal text, to show the evolution of law over time in a policy surveillance project. An amendment tracker can also be used when updating a legal assessment, turning it into a policy surveillance project. Follow these steps to create the legal text for a policy surveillance project. 1. Refined citations are recorded in the master sheet, which lists all relevant laws in one jurisdiction, along with effective dates and statutory history. 2. The researchers use the master sheets to create the amendment trackers, adding an iteration for each date the law changes. Remember, the amendment tracker describes the changes that occurred on that date. 3. The researcher will then copy the body of law for every citation in effect on that date listed for that iteration, in hierarchical order, and paste it into the legal text. The next slide shows how to create the next version for the amendment on May 11, 2012. Here you will find the completed legal text for the update on May 11, 2012. Again, for more information on collecting the law, please visit Module 4 in our Learning Library, Collecting the Law. Now that you have created the legal text, you are ready for the fourth step in tracking and updating laws, coding the law. Coding the law is when question development and collecting the law come together. Coding the law seeks to use laws that are collected for each jurisdiction to answer the questions that were developed in Module 3. Coding the law can be performed using one of several legal mapping tools. It is possible to code the law using a program such as Excel or Word, and some websites exist which are designed specifically for coding legal questions, such as monocle.com. When the change to the law does not have an impact on coding, the previous coding record can be cloned and the legal text updated. Above is an example of what coding could look like, using distracted driving as an example. The coder would read the question and relevant legal text to determine what response to select. For each time a law is amended, a new record must be coded on the monocle to reflect that amendment. Previous records should not be overwritten. New records should be added instead to show the evolution of the law over time. For more information on coding the law, please see Module 5 in our Learning Library. When coding for an update, the valid through date for all jurisdictions should be updated to indicate when the update was performed. This date indicates until when the dataset is valid. For example, if a project was last checked for updates from January 1st, 2016 to January 30th, 2016, the valid through date should be updated to January 1st, 2016 to indicate that the collected laws are valid up until that date. The valid through date should be listed in the project's research protocol. The fifth step of tracking and updating the law consists of performing quality control. Redundant research, redundant coding, and a final quality control check should all be implemented in an update. When updating, the first 5 jurisdictions assigned should be redundantly coded, with less jurisdictions redundantly coded after that, depending on the rate of divergence. Any divergences with the data before the update should be examined for inconsistencies. See Module 6 in the Learning Library for more information on how to perform quality control. The sixth step of tracking and updating the law consists of updating any relevant publication documents that may have been affected by the update. For more information on publication documents, please see Module 7 in our Learning Library. The final step in tracking and updating the law consists of publishing the new data. Here you will find a summary of what we have covered on tracking and updating the law. This concludes our policy surveillance training. Please feel free to revisit and browse the modules at any time. Thank you for watching.